Oliver, were you surprised by the leaks and the degree to which the Obama administration has been surveying Americans and non-Americans?
Surprised? Me? No. No, on the contrary, I probably felt like many Americans that they were all over the place. I think many of us feel that the government is an Orwellian state, and that because of the technology and their power, and above all their secrecy, they won't even allow you to know what the evidence is or how they got it. We all, you feel that they're in our lives, they're watching us, and I'm not being paranoid in the sense that I think that all our private conversations are pretty private because it takes too much energy to track down anybody.
1.5 billion.
In 5 years from now or in 6 years from now, who knows one? In hindsight, they can always go back and they can dig up anything. That's the sad, embarrassing thing. This country has lost its mind after 2001. We lost our mind. We overreacted to this terrorist threat as if it was a new war for all time, and we've been living in emergency conditions with an overbloated security state that costs a fortune. We literally lost our minds because we lacked courage. We lacked the courage to assess the situation directly on 2001 and to say, why did they attack us? And ask that and answer that question. And then you get your answer because we had troops in the Middle East, a lot of troops, and because we were in supporting Israel.
But would you say that this is not just a 12-year issue, because you are, of all people, you've done the untold history of the United States. You've traced it back to 1947, to the post-Second World War. And you've talked about the national security state since. So this is a natural culmination of 60-year history, isn't it?
This is a horror story. I've lived it. But in truth, 1947, when they started to, the CIA got created in 1947. Military intelligence had been around before that. But essentially, the world changed. Even Harry Truman in 1963 said, and he wrote this, he said, we have created an American Gestapo in the CIA. In the 1940s, 50s, 60s, J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI, was starting to maintain hundreds of thousands of files on Americans, individual Americans, for whatever reason. If they had some vague leftist, mostly leftist affiliation, if they joined organizations. And then when the war on terror happened, it went from a few 100,000 people to millions. And now, right now, every single American is being listened to in some way or another, and also being watched.
So that's probably what is shocking but hardly surprising. It's the fact that they're casting the net so wide, isn't it?
If we ever survive this history and we look back on this century or two, our behavior, the government's behavior, is insane. You cannot watch all its citizens. You cannot regulate them. How scared must we be? You remember that movie, Minority Report?
Yes.
Well, the next thing is they're going to put a chip in our minds and try to read our minds before we even commit the crime.
Which apparently they're doing that nowadays.
Yeah, I always lived in fear. If you're honest with yourself, I grew up in New York City. I was in 1946. I was born, and I always felt fear because of the nuclear threat. My father would say that the Russians are conspiring with the Chinese against us. The vast communist worldwide conspiracy to overthrow the United States.
And you learned what
afterwards? I lived in fear. Why aren't we doing anything? I'd say to Daddy. I'd say, why aren't we fighting them? Why aren't we getting ready? Well, because we have a democratic leadership. Nobody can decide. He would always position us as weak. America, throughout its national security state, has always felt as if it's the threatened one,
it's paradoxical,
the weaker
isn't it?
one. And
it's
that's a paradox because we got the big muscles
and the more secure,
and we act like a 98-pound weakling.
That's right.
That's what's weird about this whole thing. It's Orwell. Yeah, I wish Orwell were alive because he could write so brilliantly about it.
You're saying fear. It does seem that the only continuous justification for all that since the Cold War is a culture of fear. That's how you start these programs.
We, in the Untold History of the United States, we went there we had a Cold War chapter, and we started to discuss the idea that the entire American seed was immigrant. Everybody in America is some form of an immigrant. Right. We came here, and immigrants came from both sides, Asia and Europe, generally because of persecution of some kind. And because of that fear of persecution, they always had that fear of the foreigner. And it grew, and it became entrenched in our DNA. And you have many ignorant Americans. They don't watch the news. They don't know what really is going on abroad. They think of them as foreigners. They think of them as threatening.
So
They
the
have
new fear
another
is
accent.
Islamism.
Huh?
The new fear
Well,
is
that's
Islam.
one new fear.
That
Yeah.
replaced communism.
That is a huge fear that many Americans have.
Justified?
Communism was there before, and it isn't communism. It was not communism. When we studied untold history, we went deeper than that. It was really fear of reform. At one point, the United States went over to the other side after World War II, especially under Eisenhower and Dulles, when they started to intervene in third world countries.
Right.
Guatemala, Iran, Indonesia, Cuba,
The covert
all
operation.
the countries that were reforming themselves. The concept was they did not want reform. They wanted it the American-style system of capitalism, where we owned the resources. American corporations could own those countries or work them to exploit them. When the nationalists, the indigenous people, wanted their own oil, their own rights, their own mineral resources, we were always there to intervene. We called it communism in Indonesia, in Iran, in Guatemala, of all places. It wasn't communism. It was a desire for change and reform. Teachers were our teachers, labor alliances, land reformers. These became our enemies. So this whole thing about communism was a disguise for oppression. And I see the United States as, historically now, as having been against reform since 1940s.
Is that why you call the CIA the most criminal organ, the most?
I did
the
call
greatest-
it that.
While the former head director of the CIA was sitting like that.
Yes, I did.
You call it the greatest or the most criminal
Tom
organization.
Gates. Yeah, Gates was a bad guy, and he always had that. It was amazing that Obama appointed Gates Secretary of Defense. When he did that, I knew this was a joke. There was no change with Obama. Gates was one of the worst deputies with Bill Casey. When Casey was intervening all over Latin America, Central America, and also skewering all the Russian intelligence. You remember when Reagan he got rid of all the analysts in the CIA who basically had anything normal to say about the Soviet Union. They got rid of him, and Gates was one of these people.
So you donated money to Barack Obama.
I did.
You voted for Barack Obama.
I voted twice.
Is he disappointing, or were you just naive about him?
Very disappointing. You know, I'm a practical man. I understand the nature of politics. You become president, but he changed completely. He called.
You think
for,
he changed, or were we naive?
No, he called for transparency in government. He deplored the war in Iraq. He deplored Bush's use of tactics after 2001. He deplored the war on terror, the way it was being fought. It sounded like we're going to have a change, a real change. That never happened. Never happened. If anything, as we show in our chapter on Obama and Bush, the war on terror, we called it, the age of terror, because it is terror.
You think
He expanded the powers. He expanded the presidential powers. I want to say about 2001 that if anyone who wears their glasses, you can tell that there was enormous amounts of warnings that were heard about the terrorist incident. Normal police work, normal intelligence, cop work would have solved it and prevented it. But the White House, because it was thinking about other things and had other policies and an agenda, paid no attention to all the warnings. So as a result of that, it was politically opportune for Bush to put through another kind of security state that he wanted in place before 2001. It was outlined in the New American Century Foundation in 1998. They put in all these, the concept of going into the Middle East, the concept of expanding our involvement around the world against terror activities. All that came about because we wanted to increase our power and become a sole superpower. Remember, in 1991, the Soviet Union goes away. What do? We do not disarm.
Yeah.
We invade Kuwait, we invade Panama, we start wars. And then sure enough, the 2001 becomes a great idea to invade Iraq, which had nothing to do with 2000.
Old habits die hard, I guess.
I'm just saying normal police work, normal intelligence work, if it done well, it would have prevented it. The English, the Spanish, the Germans, the French fought terrorism successfully for 40 years before this with that kind of work. Intelligence, that's what got Osama bin Laden, somebody who finally talks. Most of the people who get revealed on these things are from insiders.
But what President Obama is saying is that the choice is between either wars and boots on the ground in Iraq and Afghanistan or surveillance.
The politicians have been lying to us for at least since 2001. They've been lying. They make everything false false opposites. It's either terror or security. It's either 100% security or 100%
And now
terror.
security or privacy.
And the truth is, terror has not killed that many people. More people die from weird accidents than from terror incidents. Terror incidents will always happen. You will never have 100% security in the entire life. Don't expect it. The life isn't that way. You go abroad, if you're an American, you might have an accident, you might be killed, robbed, whatever. That's life. We cannot live in fear of a small amount of terrorist incidents. But by the way, most of them get caught.
Most of the terrorists get caught.
So we put in very heavy-handed America, like in Vietnam, where if you have to bomb the whole place, you bomb the whole place. You don't think you Agent Orange, you defoliate the jungle. You know, there's a great quote from 2001. You know, we're looking for a needle in the haystack, but we need the haystack. In other words, if you create all this great power in the hammer, they're looking for the nail. They want the nail. Wherever the nail is, if the nail's over here, they just want to pound it. You can't be an elephant chasing in a jungle a flea. And that's what we are. So we did everything wrong.
You clearly see this as a blowback.
It's a blowback situation, totally, because of our CIA involvement in the Middle East, because of our behavior in Afghanistan. We wanted the fundamentalists. We wanted the fundamentalists in Iran in 1979 when Khomeini came back. He was our choice. We did not want a secular leftist regime in Iran because we knew that our oil and would be threatened.
Like in '53.
Anybody who was secular or leftist was dangerous to us, not because they were communists, because they were interested in reforming and bettering the life of their people. And then Afghanistan is another example. We got rid of a progressive leftist regime which was teaching women how to read and write and think. And it was doing okay under Soviet communism, actually. And we put in these fundamentalist nuthouses, who ended up
or warlords, or
we wanted them. We wanted them to destroy communism. So we got what's his name, Osama bin Laden was on our payroll for a while.
And as we said earlier, it seems like there is constant failure on the part of the CIA to predict anything that goes on.
Not only a failure to predict, but our objectives have been wrong. Bill Casey was a Christian, a devout Christian. He was essentially a fundamentalist.
The former director of the CIA.
And he wanted the fundamentalists in Afghanistan. He thought that the fundamentalists were the key to destroying Soviet communism. And we know Khomeini hated communists. We know Osama had no truck for Soviet Union. So Casey achieved his objective, but his objective was not in the interest of humanity, because fundamentalism never is. Fundamentalism is too extreme for humanity. We need a moderate middle path for humanity to succeed.
Here in the United States, you think this is going where? Are we about to witness new McCarthyism going in
What
the
do you
country?
mean new McCarthyism? We've had McCarthyism since 1950.
You think it's a continuous thing?
McCarthy was the extreme. The problem in America is the neutrals, the people in the middle, the liberals, the Cold Warriors, the guys
the Obamacans, as it were.
Obama types. Those are the people who do nothing when the McCarthys come along. Eisenhower did nothing to condemn McCarthy. Actually, Truman did. That was one of his better moments for Truman. But essentially, Eisenhower never opened his mouth about McCarthy, and many people were destroyed. The gray list was much more dangerous in some ways than the black list, because the gray list, you never knew in the 1950s why you were being not promoted or why you were shunned.
And your major disappointment with Obama is that he not only did not repudiate Bush, he perpetuated Bush.
Not only, yeah, but Obama perpetuated the war on terror with soft power, he called it, but essentially it's pretty ruthless. These drone attacks in all these countries have have increased the number of terrorists. Essentially there was after 2001, there was some 50 people on the terror lists, 50 people. Now it's thousands? Because whenever you militarize a situation, you start killing people. Of course, you create more and more violence. Violence begets violence. It's